Welcome back to the automations module. Now, before you run off, I know this looks scary, but it's actually easier than the first automation that we went over. The first automation had webhooks and APIs and all these things. While this looks a little bit more complicated, let me explain why I say it's easier. So with the previous automation, we had to get the URLs and paste the APIs and do all this stuff with webhooks. Whereas in this automation, we are simply working with a lot of applications. So the reason this looks complicated is because we're using one of those Zapier functions called paths. And what this does is pretty much just splits it and allows for different events to happen. In case something, let's say event A occurs, then it's going to follow event sequence A. And if event B occurs, it'll follow sequence B. So let's break this down. First off, high level overview, this automation is to automate your customer support for your email. So let's say a customer emails you and they need a login, or a customer emails you, they'd like a refund, or whatever the case. You can set up different scenarios for each of those instances. So our trigger is whenever a new label is applied to our email. So yes, this automation is for simplifying and automating the customer support sequence. If we look at our trigger, we are using Gmail to trigger, and the event that I've selected is a new email using this account connected. And the trigger is when I label or apply a label to a specific email. So the first automation, we talked about how to automate email reports, but let's say you don't have email reports, or you don't really care about it in terms of what you do. One thing you probably do have is customer support. Regardless of what industry you're in, it's going to be useful. Even if you don't use this for customer support, a lot of the principles laid out in this automation can be applied to other automations as well. The reason I chose the label event is because if we were to set this to trigger every time we receive a new email, well, let's say you have an inbox and you have more than just customer support going through that inbox, you wouldn't want this automation running for every single email that you're receiving. So what I did was I created a label inside of Gmail. Labels are just these custom names you can slap onto any email manually. And when I get a customer support email, I see it as a customer support email. All I do is click and drag it into that label, and it's going to fire off the automation. So it's not triggering for every single email that's coming through. I can quickly hop in, log into my Gmail, scan through whichever emails look like they are for customer support, slap them with that label, and then it's going to trigger that automation. That way I don't have to worry about setting up a new inbox only for customer support or having this automation fire off for every single email. I can just go in here, see which ones need our attention, and then hit them with the custom label. That's step number one. We've got our trigger happening for every time an email receives this label. And the label that I picked is help needed. Step 2 and 3 are pretty much going to send the email to ChatGPT, and it's going to ask ChatGPT, what's this email about? Is it a person that needs their login? Did they forget their password? Are they looking for a refund? Is it just feedback for us as a company? And it's going to determine one of 4 things. And that's where this split path thing comes into play. If the ChatGPT text box comes back and it is feedback, then it'll run through this path. If ChatGPT reads our email and figures out that this person only needs login info, it's going to filter through this path. If it's a resource not received, so let's say we were going to send them something and they did not receive it, it'll hit this path. And then if it can't identify that it's either 3 of the past 3 things, it's not login info, resource needed, whatever, and it's other, then it'll run through this path. And these all do slightly different things, but that's the basic gist of this automation. So I like this automation, like I said, because I don't have to create a new Gmail or do anything. I can set it up with a pre-existing email, go in there real quick, see which emails look like it's a customer that needs support, then apply the label, and it's going to automatically read the email, figure out what the email is about, and based on what the email is about, take a series of actions to resolve the problem. So now let's talk about how to build a Zap like this. We're just going to go to our homepage, navigate to creating a new Zap, and here we go, back at the familiar screen. So our trigger, right? It's going to be when we receive an email, but we can further specify. So let's connect our Gmail as the trigger. The event. Now let's read through some of these. New attachment, new email, that sounds promising. New email matching search, sounds promising-ish. A new label, new labeled email, new starred email, All right, so the event that we are looking for is new labeled email because we want this automation to fire off when you label an email. We'll hit continue, connect our Gmail, and now it's asking us for the trigger. So what label do we want this to fire? So we can have this. I've already got it set up. I want it to be whenever I apply the help needed label to an email. Hit continue, and it's going to be testing our trigger. So what this means is if we have nothing labeled help needed, this should fail because it can't detect anything with that label, and it did fail, no label found. So we will just quickly go and email ourselves so that we can test this automation. So here we go. I've got the test email sent. I'm setting it to the inbox that's linked to the Zapier. And I'm just going to say, I can't find my password. And we're going to hit send. So this should now come in on this end on our email that we are setting up the automation. If we give it a second. And there we go. We've got the email here. So all we're going to do is click and drag to help needed. You can also right click and apply the label. We'll click and drag. Now let's retest this trigger. And it looks like it did find our email. And it looks like we've got the body, the person that it's from, the person it was delivered to, time sent, all this data, right? We won't need all of this, but a lot of it will be useful. So we'll continue now that we've got the test step. So we've got an email that comes in, and now we've verified that it does trigger and it does fire off whenever we apply this label. However, if the goal is to automate these emails, we have to have a way of understanding, or have a way for the system to understand what each of these different emails mean. And we are going to use ChatGPT for this step. So ChatGPT has a lot of insanely useful events, such as analyzing text sentiment. I know we used the conversation step in the last example. However, for this one, we're going to have the opportunity to try a different event. So the event that we are going to select is classified text. Its description reads, classify your text into one of your provided categories. So this is going to allow us to set up different categories. Let's say your customers typically really are only looking for a password reset, or they'd like a refund, or they'd like to know their shipping information. You can have this linked up to those different routes and classify each of those as categories. So this step can read through your emails and assign each email accordingly. So we'll hit continue after selecting classified text. Make sure that our OpenAI account is connected. So the text to be classified, well, this would be the body of our email, correct? So we're going to click in here. Our dropdown is going to appear where we're going to be able to insert the body email. And here we go. Please, I cannot find my password. That looks like the email body that I did send. And now we can type out a basic prompt. Above is an email I received from a customer seeking support. In our example, we won't build out all 4 branches of the automation because it truly is the exact same thing. We just connect a different app based on whichever scenario we'd like to run differently. We'll build out 2 different branches so that you get the point without, overemphasizing. Your job will be to categorize this email into the following categories. And now that we've got our prompt, we can begin to insert our categories. So for this one, we are going to say login info as one category, and another one we are going to say refund requests. Now, of course, take a look at your business and how you guys run things, how you guys operate, and the main requests from people coming in through your email and your customer support. That way you can set up your branches accordingly and automate this. That would be in a way that would be the most efficient for you. And like I said in a previous video, because the return or the output on this prompt is really only going to be like 2 words, either login info or refund request, we can leave max tokens at 250 since it won't need a lot of tokens to generate that response. Model 3.5 turbo is completely fine. Temperature, top P, I really don't mess with these. You can play around with them if you're looking for a bit more creative responses or more variation. For this example, we'll leave them alone. And we can test this step now. So what this is going to do is feed that body email to ChatGPT with our prompt. And because we used a variable inside of step 2, it's going to just be able to label 100 emails with this label. And it's going to get those individual emails without us having to go in and copy and paste it into ChatGPT every time. That's the beauty of Zapier. So if we take a look here, it looks like we had text to classify. Please help me, I cannot find my password. And our prompt here above is an email. Here are the categories, and it looks like the category it gave back was login info. So this does look like it was a success. All right, so now we can take a little pause and think about where we are in terms of the automation. So we've successfully connected our Gmail with Zapier, and every time that we label an email that we see fit, it sends it off to ChatGPT and it gets it to classify it. Now that's where we're at so far. So we're ending up with all of these classified emails, but these classified emails are useless unless we do something with them. So for the next step, because we now have two different categories of emails in this example, we're going to build out two different branches for each of those emails and what's going to happen to them. And to do this, we're going to use a pretty fun Zapier function or built-in tools called path. And this allows you to split your path based on different rules that you can set up. So it's actually pretty intuitive. If we click in here, we can click into path number, you can see this is step 4, 5, and then step 6 and 7. So if we click into step 4, we can start to set up some of these rules. So only continue if. Now this is where we get to determine why this is happening. If path A is for the logging info, that means that the answer that ChatGPT is giving for this email needs to be login info. So we're going to go to the output and say that the category right here that it spits back is going to be, well, it must match, exactly matches, and we're going to log in. So what this is saying is if this output, the output from step 2, if the text of that output exactly matches login info, then it's going to continue down this. So let's say we had another email come in and it's a customer saying, love the course, you guys are doing a great job, just wanted to say that you guys are killing it. That would not be login info, right? ChatGPT would probably determine that as other. So that is not going to go down path A because the output from step 2 will not match login info. It would say other or feedback or something along those lines. So that's how you set these up. Now, if you remember in step 2, the options we gave ChatGPT were login info or refund request. So for the rules on step 6, we're only going to continue down this path if the output from ChatGPT, being this, matches or contains, might be smarter for contains because you won't have to worry about exact caps locks or anything like that. So I'll go back and change that one to contains, but they do similar. This one is going to be refund. We will hit OK, continue. So now we can test out this split path, and this is cool because it allows us to see that this would not have continued for this test data. If you remember, the email sample that I sent was help, I need info regarding my log. I cannot find my password. Now we have the opportunity to test the actual path split, and we can see that this path would not have continued because if you remember, the email was, I cannot find my password. And this path, we set it up to be refund request. However, if we test out this step, the path would have continued. And that is good because this is our login info path. All right, so now that we've got to think, we've got these paths firing off successfully. And so we've got emails that are being categorized as login info and refund request. So we'll tackle login info first. Now, if a customer needs help logging in, we should send them a password reset link or whatever you do when customers are having trouble logging. It might be different. So we're going to go grab that password reset link and then create our next step. So we've got some options here. And this is cool because we get a little bit of, in terms of varying degrees of automation that you can apply to this. So for example, if you didn't want to look at your Gmail ever again, ever for any customers, you could set up the initial trigger here to not only trigger when a new label is applied, but for every single email that enters your inbox. So there, you take the manual step out there. And in the next action, we want to connect Gmail because we want to help this customer. So we're going to have to email them back. So back to the varying degrees of automation ability that we can apply to this is, like I said, we can have this trigger on labels we manually apply or for every email. And we also have the opportunity here to either draft the email so that we can review before sending or have it completely just send by itself. So for this example, we are going to go to draft. You know what? we're going to have it send automatically because we want to automate and not look at our inboxes again. So we're going to hit send an email. We're going to hit this, and it's, if we read here, create and send a new email message. Exactly what we're looking for. Connect our Gmail. And this is going to be 2. So here we can apply the variables using this dropdown. And we're going to select the original sender for the email. And we're just going to go and find that email. So that's who it's to. Who will this email be sent to? Well, we're going to send it to the person who emailed us, which is this person from our example. CC, BCC, we don't need that. From, it's not necessary, but we'll include who it's from. From name, we'll skip. Reply to skip the subject line. And we're just going to apply the same subject that was in the original message. Now the body type will stick to plain, actually not even necessary to change. And here is the body. So this is our chance to draft in email, or we could put a ChatGPT step before this and have it do it for us. So why don't we go and do that instead? To do that, we'll just click here in between these 2 steps and click add a step. Search for ChatGPT, and the event is going to be conversation. It's got some send an email, write an email step. I wouldn't really recommend this step. It's just a little bit harder to set up, and you can accomplish the same thing in a simpler fashion using this conversation event. So we'll go with conversation, connect the account. Now for our action, the user message, this is pretty much just the prompt. So we want to say something along the lines of, you are a helpful assistant that just received an email from a customer seeking support for. Now, because this is going to be the same every single time, we could type in login info because we are in the login info path. However, we can also, just to be sure that this is congruent throughout all of our branches, we can say that the problem you are to help with is the output from this step, because this step determines the problem, classify text. So what is the problem? So we can put the output from number 2 because that is the problem. You are seeking support for login in. Here is the customer's email. And now we will insert the body from step 1 of the email received. Send, or we'll say craft an email, letting them know. Sorry, I paused the video because I cannot think while and type at the same time. I have 3 brain cells. So here's what I got. Here's the customer's email, space, craft an appropriate email response, and include this link for them to reset their password in brackets so that it knows exactly where the link starts and ends. And I put a basic password reset doc, right? As a test, you would want to include the actual link for your example. And we are going to also say, sign off, email, best regards, customer support. Now let's see how this does. We are going to leave all this. This is pretty solid. You could change the max tokens here, but let's try 250. Test step, loading, and we are going to see. Here we go. Dear customer, thank you for reaching out. We understand how important it is for you to access your account. To reset your password, please follow the link provided. It will redirect you to a reset password page. Best regards, customer support. Look at that. So it looks like it's following our instructions. It's signing off the email correctly. It is including that email correctly, and it's addressing the customer. Everything, this looks pretty solid. So I'm happy with this, and we will continue. Now, the reason we inserted this step before is because if we hadn't had ChatGPT craft the email for us, then we would have to have the same exact generic email every single time. But if we use ChatGPT, we can use these Zapier variables like the first name from the email and have ChatGPT insert that inside of its response. That way for all of these emails that are coming in, we can have them be customized to each of the customers and use their actual names. Back to our step 6, we will say that the body is just going to be the output from step 5 because it crafted the email for us. So we'll scroll down, find the reply. We'll hit more just to make sure that looks correct. Click it and boom. Now we can exit out of this. Don't need a signature, don't need a label. Attachments, none, continue, and we will test. So be careful because if you're not using a test email to test these, you will be emailing actual people. Don't ask me why I know that. Just kidding. Just kidding. But we're going to go ahead and test step here. And we should get an email based on, here we go. Help needed, dear customer. Thank you for your email. Follow this link here to reset your password. Of course, I used an example link. Doesn't actually work, but look at that. Zapier is setting automated emails for us already. Now, one thing to note, which is super fun because I figured this out the hard way, is this automation is going to fire off if there's an email inside of this help needed label, right? Because what kicks off this automation? Well, it's when we apply this help needed label. However, if we don't have the automation remove the label, it's going to keep firing off and keep sending those emails. I learned that the hard way, but let me show you how to do it the easy way. We are going to set up a new Gmail step because removing a label off of an email would be something that a Gmail action step would be able to do. So the event, let's look here. It'll be remove label from email. We're going to hit continue, continue. So which message to remove the label from? Now clicking here, you might get confused because these are labels. These aren't really messages. So if we go over to custom and in step 1, that initially grabbed that email, this is where we select the actual message. And if we scroll through here, we'll find the message ID. That message ID is the message that we want to remove that label from. And the label to remove is going to be help needed. And we'll hit continue. Now, because we don't have an email in help needed currently, this should fail. Oh, because that was actually in the Zapier system. Sorry, let me backtrack a little bit. All right, so let's go back to our Gmail and we will reapply the help needed label. Now that if we test this, remove it from that labeled box. Now if we go back here and we refresh, there we go. Now that email has disappeared because Zapier grabbed it and stripped it of its help needed label. So now we can go and do another step and apply a resolved. At this point, you could stop because you've sent the email and removed it from help needed. We can go one step further and we'll apply a new label, add label to an email message. And this is a similar step. The label that we want to add, I've already set it up. I want it to be resolved and the message to be labeled. We'll go back and find that message ID. There it is. Continue, and we should test it. Test your steps. It looks like it was a success. So if we go to resolved, we should see the email inside the inbox. There it is. Help needed inside our resolved tab. So this is looking good. Now we've got one path already set up, and the next one is going to be pretty similar. And a cool thing you can do is actually duplicate some of the steps that you have from other branches if you're going to use a similar action in another place. So the way that we do that is right-clicking on these 3 dots and just clicking duplicate. It'll duplicate it below. However, we can just click and drag and move it to where we need it. So this is a refund request. Now, the only thing that we're going to change in this step, because it's the ChatGPT step, ChatGPT needs to know that this is a refund request. And so the cool thing is we can use these variables here. And because step 2 is going to output the problem from the email, right? Step 2 was classify what's wrong with this email. Because we have that synced up in our step number 10 action inside of the prompt here, we actually don't need to change anything in terms of, hey, this one's different, this one's for refunds, this one's for login, because that variable is attached inside of the prompt. Now, of course, we're going to say, here's the customer's email, craft an appropriate email response, sign off every email with best regards, customer support. Now we can go through, we'll leave those the same, and we shall retest. Let's take a look here. Thank you for reaching out to us. We understand how important it is to access your accounts. All right, so if we take a look at the output for this step, we've got some forgot password info in here, and then at the bottom, it's talking about the refund request. You might be thinking it's talking about 2 different things. It's getting confused. This is a failed step. It's actually correct. As you can see at the bottom, it's doing the refund request step. And the only reason it's talking about forgetting your password, the forgotten password thing, is because the example that we used talking about the login info specifically. So this is a successful step. So now that we've got the email crafted, we want to send that email, right? So we can just go over here, click duplicate, and move it over. So it's going to give us a heads up and say that data lives in its current path. This is just because of some mapping stuff. It's using variables from steps in path A, and we're moving over to path B, and it's saying what are you doing? So we'll move step and we'll just go and remap it. And the thing that it's talking about is right here in the body. We want to switch it over to the output from step 10. So we'll go over to step 10, find the reply, and boom, we are back on track. Now we can hit continue and test the step. And this is going to send an email, and we should be receiving a new email. There it is with our refund information. Beautiful. Now this is looking good. And now we can just copy steps 7 and 8 as well. So we'll go ahead and duplicate, remove the label from this, and then add a label, duplicate, boom. And there we go. So now we've set up another automation where if somebody wants their login info, we've got a chatbot set up to automatically assist them and send them that link. And if somebody is looking to request a refund, we send out an email that says, of course, no problem, it's on their way. Now, if somebody requests a refund, of course, you would want to have a notification about that. So we'll add another step in here to differentiate it from path A, where because, we're dealing with refunds, we want to make sure that we're refunding the people. So we'll do a ClickUp notification or a Slack notification. There's so many ways to do this, but for this one, we'll use ClickUp. So we'll just add a step here for ClickUp. And the event is going to be create a task. We'll connect our ClickUp account, select our workspace, the space that the workspace lives in, and then the folder that the space where the workspace is in, shout out ClickUp, and then the list that the folder that the space that the workspace is in, right? Okay, so yeah, we'll skip template. We don't need this. Now the task name, we have some free reign in terms of creativity. For this example, I want to just use we'll say refund, and then the customer's name. The customer's name is going to be attached to that email. And we grab that email data from step 1. So we'll go to step 1 to find that name. From name, Alfredo Bravo. There we go. Task description, we'll say refund this person. Assignee emails, nothing like that, nothing crazy. We can assign this to whoever is in charge of emails, for example, but for this, we won't need to. And this is looking pretty good. We'll set the priority, make this urgent. We'll hit continue and we'll test step. Now, while that is testing, let's log into ClickUp and we should see a brand new task pop up. There we go. Refund, Alfredo, priority, urgent. Beautiful. Look at that. So there we go. That is how you set up an automation to automate your customer support for your email inbox. Now, of course, take these principles that we've applied in this video. And if you don't use ClickUp, obviously set up the Slack action. If you don't have customers requesting login info, of course, set up the prompts so that it's specific to your use case and useful for you. I hope this was useful in terms of explaining branches and how to automate your customer support. I'll see you guys in the next one.